Welcome to Aloft. Every good survival game has something unique, and for this game, that identity is plain to see. This video is sponsored by Aloft. Aloft is a perfect cozy survival game to enjoy with your friends during the winter season, with up to 8 players in multiplayer. Set in the clouds, you'll explore the vast skies with your glider and your very own flying island. The game is available right now in early access on Steam. So let's get into it and see what's on offer. The premise of Aloft is quite simple. Developed by Astrolabe Interactive, this is a cozy co-op sandbox survival set amongst the clouds. Find lost knowledge, cure the fungal corruption of the world, and brave the hurricane to restore the ecosystem. Travel between islands on your glider, and when you find one you like, claim it and commandeer it and create your own flying island, where you can build your own base, raise animals, farm crops, and much more. Aloft has a very simple premise. There's nothing too complicated here, but it's a great lightweight introduction that really serves what the game is all about. Aloft begins in a very simple manner. You create your character and then you're put into the world. The game doesn't hold your hand too much, asking you to undertake a few simple tasks before setting you out into the wider sky. Unlike other titles that task you with managing hunger, fighting back hordes of enemies, or surviving tough environments, Aloft focuses far more on creating a stress-free experience, one that you can get lost in, with goals you're free to pursue in your own time with very little pressure. Again, there is very little hand-holding, and the game prefers to allow you to chart your own course as opposed to following a rigid set of requirements that you must adhere to. The core focus is taking things at your own pace, and that is embodied throughout the game. You rarely feel rushed to do pretty much anything. The survival genre is often almost characterised by a whole bunch of stress factors all compounding together, and Aloft really takes the opposite approach. I think that approach is quite effective, and it does feel like a breath of fresh air. To that end of creating a relaxing experience, Aloft's main focus is exploration. You get your hands on a glider almost immediately, which quickly provides ample access to all the nearby islands in the starter biome. There's plenty to explore, resources to gather, animals to find, and knowledge to discover. Additionally, you'll stumble across impressive vistas like tumbling waterfalls, swirling whirlwinds in the distance, and just the sheer breadth of the open skies. The glider itself is one of the best tools for this exploration, allowing you to fly freely. There's no complexity in how it works, nor does it need repairs or does it force you to land at any point. You are pretty much free to glide around to your heart's content. Your tools also don't require any upkeep, and drinking or eating is used mostly to buff your character, as opposed to fighting off the effects of thirst or starvation. There are very, very few inbuilt stressors designed to force you into a task, and with the aim of creating something cozy and easy to enjoy, the game does a great job of allowing you to enjoy your exploration with very little worry. Exploration is at this game's core and is one of its best aspects. This only evolves further when you claim your first island. Alongside giving you a permanent respawn point and a place you can freely teleport to, your island serves as a vehicle. Outfit it with sails, rudders and more to transform your island from a floating chunk of rock to an airship, one you can freely build on. This allows you to traverse the sky into different biomes, and of course offers a ton of customization. You're no longer restricted to just your glider, you can fly a gargantuan city or a humble homestead across the skies. Though Aloft is a cozy experience, there is still also combat to be had. You'll find some islands that have been taken over by corruption, a fungus-like infestation that creates enemies and explosive mushrooms. Combat isn't the focus of Aloft, and thus it's a rather simple affair, but it can be challenging depending on how many enemies the game throws at you. Generally speaking though, it's pretty easy and you will get the hang of it quite quickly. When you clear the corruption, the island will be free from the infestation and returns to its usual green splendour. Some relics of corruption may still linger, you'll need to clear them out too if you want to reclaim the island, alongside helping to rebuild any of its missing features. That leads us onto one of Aloft's major mechanics, the ecosystem. Aloft has over 500 handmade islands, and each has its own ecosystem, and the game wants to ensure that you sustain it. Islands contain plenty of resources, but rarer resources like plants and animals can't be taken from the island unless it's at a certain level of sustainability, and if an island is missing animals, insects or plants, you'll find it looking a bit worse for wear. Most islands will entice you into fixing the ecosystem by locking the aforementioned rare resources, animals or even knowledge behind that mechanic. You can keep track of each island's ecosystem with the Field Guide, a book that displays the condition of the flora and fauna and what steps need to be taken to fix those factors if necessary. It'll also tell you the minimum number of each resource for a stable ecosystem, so the overflow is the amount you can take without damaging the wildlife and plants, which does remove a lot of guesswork from the equation. When you do restore an ecosystem, the island returns to its usual lush green and you're able to gather those rare resources. However, if you take too many of the important resources, the ecosystem can begin to fail again, so you have to ensure you take a sustainable amount. Fortunately for resources like plants and trees, seeds are plentiful, and planting them will ensure you can return to that island later to harvest more. Building is also a huge aspect of Aloft, and I think they've handled the building system pretty well. It's quite similar to Conan Exiles, though it is a touch more involved. Building materials are usually quite cheap, and everything seems to work pretty much as you would expect. The first building set you'll have access to is wooden with a turfed grass roof, and it really fits the vibe of the game quite well. You build pretty much everything through the building hammer, and once you've laid out your base, some pieces like walls, roofing, etc. need to be completed by just hitting them a few times with your hammer to fill in the remaining resources. If you complete a full combo, which is done by hitting that little gold section of the swing cooldown bar multiple times, you'll fill in the piece you're aiming at and some others around it. One of the more genius pieces of this building system, however, is the sketchbook. As you explore the islands, you'll likely come across building pieces you don't yet know how to create, from wall pieces or roofs to small birdhouses. By creating a sketchbook, alongside having the resources needed to draw in it, you can aim at a piece you don't know, sketch it out, and you'll learn the recipe to build it. This is a brilliant idea for the building system and works really well in practice. There's plenty of survival games that show you building pieces or decorations before you know how to create them, and in Aloft, so long as you have your sketchbook and some drawing supplies, you can learn how to make that building piece there and then. The developers estimate that Aloft contains roughly 25 to 30 hours of gameplay, not counting of course creative building and such, so I've not yet reached the late game as I am recording this on launch day, but it's important to note that Aloft does seemingly get a fair bit deeper. Alongside some of the stuff I've already mentioned like farming, cooking, crafting, building and animal husbandry, the final goal is to reach the Leviathan, a huge flying creature. Free it of its corruption and you'll be able to gain late game resources, upgrades, decorations, and you can even build a village on its back. Additionally, the game almost begins to stray into the automation genre with windmills, allowing you to harness the winds to power your machines and automate production. You're able to create your own islands with the in-game island editor to place into your worlds. You can also save and import your island into a friend's world, so you can continue your character and progression from world to world. Finally, I wanted to talk about my overall initial experience with the game. I've still got plenty more ahead of me to explore, but so far the game has definitely achieved its aim of a laid-back experience. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the cozy genre, probably the only exception I found until now was Stardew Valley, but Aloft definitely has that relaxing quality to it, in no small part thanks to the sound design. The soundtrack itself is wonderful, ambient but with just enough flavour to stand out, but when you combine it with the soundscape in the game, it really is rather nice. Have a listen. I will say, I did encounter a couple of teething issues. The game has a first person mode, but I found it to be a bit tight. It gives you a much better scale of the world, but again, it was a bit tight. I did actually see another Steam review about this, and the guy that left that review said that Astrolabe had already reached out to him to suggest some setting changes to help, and to gather his feedback on how they could fix it, which is really nice to see. For the time being, I played in third person, and it was all pretty nice. There were a couple of minor performance hitches when I was flying around, a few frame drops here and there, but they mostly disappeared when I dropped down from high to medium. That complaint appears in a lot of reviews, but it's not really a major issue, something that will undoubtedly get smoothed out throughout early access. The final thing is that I think the game could benefit from just a little more guidance. There were a couple of times I was a little unsure of how exactly to progress and upgrade my gear, or to take steps to restore an island's ecosystem. It's something that you'll likely get a grasp on pretty quickly, but just a touch more guidance in that department would be a big help. There is also an in-game encyclopedia that does tell you about a lot of things in the game, so if they do add some more tips or guidance, that seems like a great place to put them. Overall though, Aloft has a lot of promise. For an early access launch, it seems to have come out pretty well, and it certainly hits the cozy vibe it's aiming for. It might not be for everyone, but if you're after a relaxing experience that gives you plenty of freedom and doesn't ask too much of you at any one time, Aloft seems to be the perfect place to enjoy that experience. Thank you again to Aloft for sponsoring this video. Again, the game is available now through Steam Early Access for $25. If you like what I've shown you today, consider giving it a go or adding it to your Steam wishlist. That will wrap us up for today. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. If you want to see videos early and support the channel directly, consider joining us over on Patreon, link in the description and pinned comments. Take care, and I'll see you soon.